Alright guys, let me ask you something. Why is it that when people talk about the most competitive fighting games, they always bring up games like Street Fighter 6, Tekken 8, or even games like Guilty Gear Strive or 2XKO, but when it comes to Mortal Kombat 1, the conversation feels different. Because it's not that Mortal Kombat is just a bad game fundamentally, it's not that it just doesn't require skill, and it's definitely not that it doesn't have a competitive scene, but if we're being honest, it's never treated the same way. And that's not an accident. There's actually a real reason for that. There are multiple reasons. And once you start looking at them, you realize something. Mortal Kombat wasn't built the same way as those games. But before we get into that, if you guys don't know me by now, I'm Mr. Frosty Flames, but you can call me Mike. We do anything gaming news, reviews, playthroughs, etc. And we're closing in on 1700 subs. So make sure you subscribe and join the Frosty Flames Legion for more content and for me to keep going and push forward for these videos for you guys. Anyways, back to the video. First, I want to talk about the design philosophy of the game, and this is the biggest difference. Games like Street Fighter 6 and Tekken 8 are built from the ground up with competition in mind. Every system is designed to reward character mastery, encourage long-term skill growth, and create consistent, repeatable outcomes. They want players to grind, improve, and compete at very high levels, but Mortal Kombat, it's really taking a different approach because it's more designed to be accessible, more cinematic, look cool, and just be immediately fun, which is great for a wide audience and more importantly a casual audience, but it changes how the game plays at a competitive level. And this is one of the most underrated differences. If you guys didn't realize, Mortal Kombat has a block button, whereas Tekken, Street Fighter, those other games, what they do is you just have to hold back to block or hold down and back at the same time to block. In Mortal Kombat, you press a button to block, usually right trigger. And that might seem small, but it changes how defense works. In games like Street Fighter, you have movement options and defense, and they're tied together. Spacing becomes more skill-based and footsies matter even more. In Mortal Kombat, defense is really more static, reactions are simplified, and movement feels less fluid. And that reduces one of the biggest competitive elements, is the neutral game depth. And this leads to another big difference, which is neutral versus set play. In Street Fighter 6, for example, neutral is everything. Positioning decides fights. Small decisions matter. In Tekken 8, for example, it's more on spacing, timing, and reads. They dominate the game. And movement is a skill on its own. In Mortal Kombat, the game leans more into set play, pressure, and pre-built offense. Once someone gets in, they could run their game, which could feel less like a back and forth and more like it's your turn, now it's my turn, then it's your turn, and then my turn. And you know, a lot of players don't like that. They feel like it's gearing towards more of like a casino style. You're playing rock paper scissors each time, but in my opinion that's not really bad, but it's less appealing for hardcore competitive players. And another huge difference that people don't talk about enough is that Mortal Kombat keeps changing its systems. I know I talked about this in other videos, but to go over it briefly, every single game sort of has a different system that makes the game feel completely different. Say Mortal Kombat 9 up until Mortal Kombat 1. You have Mortal Kombat 9, you have different mechanics that basically make it different than the other 3D era games. That's okay because you're rebooting the series and NetherRealm is starting fresh. That's okay. And then the bounce from Mortal Kombat 9 to Mortal Kombat X, I feel like that is okay too, because Mortal Kombat X really just takes what works in Mortal Kombat 9 and enhances it with like a run system and making the pace faster. But then Mortal Kombat 11 just throws it all away and you have a slower, more defensive system with, you know, all those 2 bars for offense, 2 bars for defense. You have like breakaways, all this stuff, fatal blows, etc, etc. But then you go to Mortal Kombat 1, which plays fundamentally different from Mortal Kombat 11 because it tries to go in between that Mortal Kombat X and Mortal Kombat 11 style, which I like because I didn't really like the slower pace from Mortal Kombat 11. But then you have that, you know, mid pacing, but then you sprinkle in a cameo system and make it a tag fighter. This is what it is. Every game is different, and compare that to Street Fighter and Tekken. They both build on its foundation. Tekken more so evolves, but it does stay consistent. Mortal Kombat reinvents itself every time, and I feel like that hurts the competitiveness because players can't really build long-term mastery because their skills don't carry over from game to game. Obviously, you'll have the fundamental skills of a fighting game, or you know, from playing Mortal Kombat, you'll understand how to play the next one at least at a base level. But you gotta understand the mechanics again, and if you don't like them, it could easily ruin the experience for you. In Mortal Kombat 1 specifically, the cameo system adds assist characters. It makes it a tag fighter, which sounds competitive on paper because you have other tag fighters that are very competitive, but in reality, it creates more chaos, more unpredictability, and more guess-heavy, unblockables, situations where they're doing like an overhead and low at the same time, and it's just BS. And compare that to something like Marvel vs. Capcom. It's really less refined. And compare that to Street Fighter or Tekken. It adds randomness instead of consistency, and competitive players value consistency over everything. And here's the real core of Mortal Kombat. I feel like it's built for a casual first audience, and that's not a bad thing for a fighting game. Not all fighting games need to be competitive. It's actually why the series is so successful, because it prioritizes things like story mode, cinematic presentation, fatalities, and huge spectacles, and that brings in the wider audience. Meanwhile, Street Fighter and Tekken prioritize competitive systems, more balance, and more long-term depth, so naturally they attract a different type of player. And this leads into another key difference: risk versus reward. In games like, say, Guilty Gear Strive, you have high risk, high reward. Mistakes are punished hard, and skill expression is clear. In Mortal Kombat, you have a lot of safer options. Defensive mechanics could simply just bail players out with breakers and stuff. Offense could be more scripted, which lowers the overall skill ceiling of Mortal Kombat. Now, don't get me wrong, the Mortal Kombat pros are amazing at their game, and I'm not saying it doesn't have a competitive scene, period, but if you compare the pros of Mortal Kombat and the competitive scene with like other fighting games, I feel like it's not as big and is not as renowned as, say, like Street Fighter or Tekken. You have big names in the Mortal Kombat competitive scene, like, say, like Ninja Killer, Sonic Fox, a Foxy Grandpa, etc., etc., but then you compare that to, say, Street Fighter's big players like Daigo and Punk, they're, Knuckle-Doo, they're all very massive compared to the Mortal Kombat. They're all very popular. And you could see it with Street Fighter and Tekken because they have long-standing esports ecosystems. They have a lot of consistent mechanics, and they're recognized on a global level. Whereas Mortal Kombat, it does have a scene, like I said, but it's just smaller and less consistent. And I feel like that part comes from the game's design choices. But to be fair, Mortal Kombat does things better than those games by a lot, which what I say is like accessibility, presentation, story, and just like the instant fun factor, the instant, anyone could just pick up and play it and have fun. However, other games are starting to catch on and make it accessible and competitive. So games like Street Fighter, they have the modern controls and they have a open world story mode where Mortal Kombat doesn't really have any of that. So if Mortal Kombat doesn't adapt, they're just gonna fall behind. However, when people say Mortal Kombat isn't as competitive, it's not because it just lacks skill, it's because it's built differently. It prioritizes fun first and competition second, while other games like Street Fighter and Tekken do the opposite. And honestly, that might be exactly why Mortal Kombat is as popular as it is. But it also explains why when it comes to pure competition and just esports level factor, it's never quite in the same conversation. That's why at EVO, Combo Breaker, all these major fighting game cons and tournaments, Mortal Kombat isn't listed as one of the premier games shown. There were even times where Mortal Kombat games aren't even there at all, because Mortal Kombat isn't trying to be the most competitive game, it's trying to be the most entertaining one, and I think that works because that difference changes everything about it. But that's just my take on it. Let me know what you guys think down below. Do you guys play Mortal Kombat competitively still, or have you moved on to another game? Me personally, I moved on to Street Fighter, and I'm trying to get into Tekken, but Tekken's hard to get into if you know. But I'm enjoying Street Fighter a lot more. That's why I used it a lot as an example. Anyways, thank you all for watching. If you like this video, make sure you subscribe and join the Frosty Flames Legion. Like, comment, share, do all that stuff. You know what to do. Thank you for watching. Mr. Frosty Flames out. Ciao.